So, Soren, folks are about to watch our premiere episode of the Inspired Insights podcast, and we thought it would be important to record a little, maybe just a little spoiler of what folks are about to see.
Yes. So we embarked on that journey, I'd say fairly ignorant of the technology which we were taking advantage of. I showed up late because I was taking a nap, and so did Chris, and my mom couldn't help us
That's right.
set up the recording business.
And this space that we're in, and one day folks might see the space we're in, but for today, there's a lot of buttons and pieces to bring this to fruition. And unbeknownst to us,
our mics were muted.
Yeah. So fortunately, we were recording. Fortunately, your mom is a brilliant editor and producer that she doesn't even give herself credit for. Fortunately, artificial intelligence exists, but we just thought it was important that people realize that, part of the Inspired Consulting Group brand and part of what we want Inspired Insights podcast to be about is this idea that we are all human.
Yeah.
That perfection is not even part of the journey that you and I are interested in being on, that this is a work in progress. You and I, we are works in progress. Our best days are still ahead. And the best days for this podcast are still ahead.
Yeah.
So we just want to explain that this premiere episode is a longer episode. It is a little bit of an introduction to you and I and the dynamics that we bring to this podcast. And this premiere episode is about grace, and vulnerability, and asking our listeners to bear with us.
Yeah.
What you will see in the next couple episodes, I hope, is an evolution of the process. And we want to thank folks for joining us in this premiere episode and for sticking with us, learning with us, growing with us, evolving with us, and just being patient with us.
Yeah. And with all that said, I think that we managed to put together something all right.
I'm very proud of what you and I and your mom have built here. And I'm excited for people to see what the future episodes hold.
Yeah.
So without further ado, you're about to listen to episode 1 of the Inspired Insights podcast. Here we are.
Take one. This is Inspired Insights' first podcast. I'm Soren Peterson. I'm a junior at Hamden Academy. And I'm here with...
And I am Chris McLaughlin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in the Bangor area. Hi, Soren.
Hi.
This is really exciting. This is fun.
I'd say, yeah.
This is my first time with anything podcast, and watching you put together all this setup here has been pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'd say I'm no expert, but I try my best.
It looks good. It looks like we know what we're doing here. So I'm excited to get chatting with you.
Yeah, I think that there are a ton of interesting conversational topics that we can explore with this. And we talked at a coffee shop a while ago, just prepping for this, and I think that we've got some natural chemistry.
I think so too. I think we've got a lot of interesting conversations ahead, a lot of discussions to have, and I'm hoping that as this conversation goes on, we can get folks who are listening to give us some other ideas and other suggestions and feedback, and have this thing grow over time.
Yeah, I think that it has the potential to be something really cool. I know for me, a big reason why I'm doing this is to do a little bit of outreach and try to get another experience like mine out for people to listen to and watch if you're seeing the video of this. Because I think that not a lot of youth that have had like mental struggles are able to, when they're still fairly young, talk about it eloquently. And I think that that is something that's really an asset to me. And conversation has been something really important in my processing of really everything, and maintaining emotional stability and such.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's what I know about you. You are somebody who is an external processor like myself as well. And so that ability to connect with other people, to share experiences, to learn from other experiences while also hoping others can learn from yours is a big part of who you are. And you coming into your senior year of high school, and I know you are starting to think about what comes next. After high school, you get a big trip next couple weeks from now, I know.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that as this conversation evolves over the next couple weeks, months, who knows, you will also develop some insights even deeper into yourself that you'll be able to share with the people that cross your path in the future as well.
Yeah, and I hope that what we do here and what we express here does resonate with a lot of people, because I think that we'll be able to get at some really deep topics that not a lot of people spend time thinking about, and or even have the capacity to really explore deeply by themselves. And I just really hope that it resonates with people, and our experiences and your wisdom and my, I guess, most recent learning.
Lived experiences.
I'm still in the learning phase, but can help other people grow and people relate to them.
Yeah, I think so too. So, I think as we're sitting here getting ready to launch into this experiment in a lot of ways, I think it would be helpful to just share with folks listening a little bit about you and some of that experience that you're talking about, recognizing that, even your ability to process through it is still evolving. And so just being able to share openly that you have struggled with some emotional health, mental health stuff. So I'm curious if you want to share anything right now.
Yeah. So, like a lot of teens, I had a very, very difficult preteen and early high school experience that involved a lot of really dysfunctional behaviors, like self-injury, a lot of destructive behaviors around like substance use and stuff. And I sort of lost who I was, right? And I think I was running from who I was, because like a lot of my issues were initially trauma related, and then like it festered. So I ended up like loathing everything that I had been before the traumatic injury, because it just reminded me of that, and I had attached it to be the cause of that event. So I entirely changed my personality, my outlook on life. I became like deeply nihilistic, and it was really unfortunate, but like I actively tried to suppress the empathy that I had, because even like feeling for others would make me realize how deeply I was hurting, right? And I was hurting the people around me. So I was just constantly racked with like guilt with that. So I felt like I was digging myself this emotional hole where I was guilty to be around my parents because I was failing them. I felt like I was failing them actively. And I, like, whenever I would get into my own head, it would just be a really unsafe environment for me, and I'd end up doing something really dumb. So actually, as like my primary coping mechanism, which I think a lot of teens experience today, was like social media addiction. Not so much like Instagram or stuff like, or TikTok, because I don't think that either of those really have the things that I'm super interested in. But like I was just constantly on YouTube, and like 8 hours a day. and I neglected my body. I was barely sleeping. It was a whole situation.
Yeah. And, one of the things I love about you, Soren, is you kind of have a foot in a couple different worlds with these conversations. You have that I'm a teen world, and the friend group that you have represent a whole lot of different lived experiences within the teen population. So you've got this really like insider view on what it feels like to be a young person in the world today. And you have this ability to project yourself wiser beyond your years. And I've known you for a very long time. I've been friends with your family for a very long time. You have always been like that. So I love to watch you vacillate between I'm a teenager and I'm doing teenager stuff, and you've got this 20,000 foot perspective on the world around you, and just very insightful and analytical, and you love to learn, you love to dig into stuff. So to hear you talk about this YouTube addiction, knowing how much you love to learn, like sometimes I'm sitting here wondering how much of that was you attempting to process through and learn about what was going on for you, and how much of it was a distraction, how much of it was a defense mechanism, a coping strategy to get away from what you were dealing with.
Yeah, like I did, like, it was engaging material, but ultimately it was escapism.
Yeah.
And like I engaged with a lot of it was about like modern affairs. I spent a lot of time learning about philosophy and like modern geopolitical environments. I got really into history, and I still am really into history. But I think the way I went about it both ignored the experience that I was having and my emotions. It was very much trying to put myself in a world that was different from where I was.
Yeah, that's that escapism piece.
Yeah. And also by looking at modern events and all of these awful things that was going on around the world. And I think that like the news actively encourages this because like tragedy is a moneymaker, right? So I would see all of these awful things going around me, and I'd be like, wow, the world is what I think it is, right?
Yeah.
So I'd use it to justify my really like people-loathing, nihilistic worldview, thinking that like everything was going to go to crap, and it really didn't serve me to do that. Right. And now I watch that content and I'm like, wow, this is really unfortunate. What can I do? And then I watch other content on what other people are doing to like help these things. And I think because these things are so widely available in the media, it makes a lot of people think that that's all that's going on, when in reality, like right now in the world, we have the lowest incidence of extreme poverty, like right in human history. We have the lowest violence rates in human history. Like humanity, in my eyes, is on the up and up. And every single day that we strive for more community and empathy, and we make technological developments, is another opportunity to like better ourselves, better humanity, and be optimistic about the future.
Yeah.
So I really am hopeful, and I've gone from a place of like seeing awful things and being like, man, that justifies my like really awful worldview and the behaviors that I'm doing, because ultimately nothing matters. And now I look at them and I'm like, wow, these things have weight. Yeah. So it's important for me to contribute as well.
Yeah. You're talking about this distinction of being going from a passive consumer of media and just letting it wash over you, to being more active in that consumption, more intentional with what you're watching and how you're processing what you're watching. And so I'm thinking a lot right now about how you talked about the social media addiction, and doom scrolling is something that gets a lot of attention right now. And there's a lot of conversation about how much is too much. Is the addiction to social media and short 30-second, 1-minute clips, is that an addiction? And I'm wondering if you have thoughts from your own experience about what that felt like in your own body and your own brain.
I mean, I think it 100% is. Like, chemically, it's the exact same thing. It's just always searching for a little bit of dopamine, right?
Yeah.
And I don't really like the usage of neurotransmitters in like layman's terms, but like that is literally what's happening. And like I've struggled with addiction issues with other stuff like self-harm, obviously, using substances as like a escapism. And it's, I think psychologically, the exact same thing. Perhaps it's like less frowned upon and more normalized.
Yeah.
But like it is, in my eyes, the exact same thing. And you noted like being an active consumer of these things. Obviously, like you can't get away from it. But like kids nowadays, they were born into it.
Yeah.
It's not like they got into it and can't get away. That's just where they are. And like we're not teaching small children how to be active consumers and like sort through what they're viewing. And it's really difficult too because parents don't know what their children have access to.
Right.
If you have a Wi-Fi connection, your kid is looking at some vile stuff. And I don't mean a fearmonger, but like children are desensitized nowadays.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to pick through the content that we are
doing. And I don't even think, to piggyback on your comments here, I don't even think we know the damage that is being done. I feel like this is something that 5, 10, 15 years from now, somebody is going to say, this is the root cause of a lot of the social contagions that we're struggling with now, but certainly might be exacerbated. So it's interesting to hear you have this optimistic view on humanity and the direction we're going in, when sometimes from my perspective, like I'm wringing my hands, running fingers through hair, what little I have left, going like, we're in trouble. I worry, as a social worker, approaching 50 years old, having worked with kids and families my entire career, seeing this acuity in 4-year-olds that I've never seen before. And that doesn't even, not to minimize what we're seeing in school-age kids or preteens and teenagers, young adults, but the acuity in 4-year-olds is unlike anything I've seen before in the work I do with some preschools. And so I'm worried for families. I'm worried for parents who maybe don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's bring this down to some real like tangible suggestions or recommendations. So from a 17-year-old perspective, as somebody who, by your own admission, struggled with this kind of addiction, with consuming this type of media for hours and hours on day, what do you want families to know? What do you want parents to know? And how do you empower a parent to take control of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's really difficult because like kids scoff at parents when parents try to give advice on these things because the kid is like, you don't know anything about like what's happening. Mm-hmm. And it's really easy for kids to conceal what they're doing. So obviously I don't think that authoritarian like cracking down is an effective tool to try to get kids to stop engaging with these things. But I know like something that really was quite impactful in my realizing that the internet is not something integral to me is like going outside and interacting with friends. Like during the summers, the summer in between 8th grade year and freshman year, I sat inside the entire time.
Just
scroll, like watching YouTube and playing video games. Yeah. And we live in like a beautiful area where there's tons of things to do like out and about. So I think like the outdoors and like physical activity in that way and interacting with peers one-on-one provides a far more engaging experience than the internet. And like showing your kids that these things outside of the internet are super engaging and fun, because they totally can be.
Yeah.
And I think they're better than the internet, can make the kids like look up and realize, oh, this is more fun than what I was doing, so I want to do this.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be something where you're like ordering stuff. It should be something where it's like just fun to not be on the internet.
Yeah.
And I have so much more fun like reading books now. I'm getting really into and going on hikes than I ever would engaging in like a content machine.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what I hear you saying is that the because I said so, because I'm the boss approach isn't going to work. Let me throw a little curveball at you. So I work with a significant amount of families who their kids, regardless of the age, are a little bit more introverted, maybe a little bit more on the fringes of what might be the cool crowds. And so when I'm working with a parent or a caregiver who is concerned because their child is a loner, maybe not super accepted at school, maybe getting bullied, and they don't have friends. They don't have a lot of friends or any friends, and maybe there's no siblings or even neighbors. How does that parent get that introverted, shy, kind of rejected and dejected kid out in the world, out interacting with real humans, when they're getting so much validation online and they're getting so much validation, they feel like they have friends in this digital space who you and I both know very well could be 30-year-old men, 30-year-old women pretending to be something they are not. But these kids' brains, they are connected. They do have friends. They don't need real life people.
Yeah, like my current friend group now is like a lot of, it's like mathletes mostly.
Yeah.
And they are those kids, right? And they have formed communities online, like Discord specifically is like prolific, and I love engaging with my friends on Discord. And like I think parents oftentimes discount the relationships that kids have online because they're not real relationships. And like I don't mean to criticize you, but like the fear mongering about how every person's lurking behind a corner on the internet trying to like take advantage of you. Yes, that is a real problem. And yes, that does exist. And we need to safeguard for that. But also you can't use that to discount your children's relationships.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to one of my really good friends about his experience during COVID. And he is very introverted. You're like very nerdy. He doesn't have like necessarily the social skills that a lot of his peers have. But he found a community online during COVID, and it was like 8 to 10 other people from an age range of like 15 to like even 25. That was his only community during COVID. And he mentioned how that lack of I guess in-person socialization sort of resulted in him having less social skills now, but also how if he hadn't have had that, how awful his COVID experience was. And I think that like parents have a tendency to vilify online relationships because they don't know the other people. They can't vet them. And
that's 100%. Yeah.
There's a lot of fear there, obviously. But also just like listen to your kid. I think obviously children don't necessarily know the best risk management skills, but like if your child is engaging socially in a healthy way, that's not like comparing themselves to others with something like Instagram, and they're just having fun playing video games with a few friends that they met online, that can be something totally healthy. And like it can be a stepping stone to real life in-person socialization. Like these kids are learning social skills on the internet, and it can help them make new friends in person.
Yeah. It's balance, right?
Yeah.
It's,
I totally agree. Yeah.
You know, that's kind of one of just my mantras personally and professionally, that too much of one thing is too much. And so to really try to find that balance between these online relationships, and to your earlier point, get out, do something, go interact, go be part of these communities, these clubs, these groups of kids with similar interests, but it's about the balance.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Like, my brother doesn't spend any time playing video games. He's very physical.
Yes.
And very brutish is a bad word. He just like he's physically oriented. He's athletic. He's like your typical jock. And I'm very much not that.
Yeah.
And he sometimes demeans me for the way I engage with my friends, because I do spend a good amount of time, at least on the weekends, playing video games with them, because it's really fun. And like some of the experiences help me with real life situations. But just like, don't demean your children for the things that they enjoy. Instead, if you want them to like change mindset or shift the activities that they do for fun, introduce them to stuff, right? Like children need to make these decisions organically, because if they, especially like teens who are super rebellious, if they feel like something's being forced on them, they're gonna hate it.
Yeah.
Even if it's awesome, like they'll hate it if you're forcing it on them.
Yeah. You're talking about balance again. Like, I know that your Monday through Thursday schedule is ridiculous with school and homework and other activities that you're involved with. And so it makes sense to me, Soren, that you are to the grind Monday through Thursday, and come the weekends, you want to kick back, relax, sleep in, hang out online, play with friends, just chill. So again, I hear you talking about balance.
Yeah. And like every weekend I have an in-person like sleepover with some section of my friend group.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really valuable to me. And oh my goodness, it's contagious. We're all
messing with the technology here.
I've lost my train of thought.
Sleepovers
Whatever will I do?
Friends.
Oh yeah, sleepovers with friends. That's something super valuable and that should be valuable and that should be encouraged. But like my friend, he struggles with a lot of like social anxiety and anxiety around that. So that's not something that he can always do or bring himself to do, because it's scary to sleep in a house with other people if you've never really done that.
Yeah.
It's scary to be in these overwhelming situations with like 4 other kids that you might know or you might not really know.
And the reverse of that is that it's super comfortable to be in my bedroom with my headset on, with my online persona, with my online friends, being in a space that I'm in control of whether I plug in or plug out.
Yeah. That actually mirrors exactly what he was saying. Like, it's so comfortable and it's like an environment which he's spent so much time in. And it's really like kids are engaging with healthy things on their own terms. Right. And I think especially once you start getting into like junior year and senior year, a lot of these high schoolers who during their like early high school career were behaving in unhealthy things. Like I know I was behaving in some really unhealthy ways. They learn to self-regulate and they start to like examine the root of their behaviors. And I think especially like kids when they're freshman year don't think anything's going to change. And that is so short-sighted. And I thought that nothing was going to change. And I considered like suicide a lot because I was like, well, if this is what it's going to be like then this is not worth it. But like everybody is always in a state of constant flux, and getting like your kids to understand the transience of their own emotional state is really important. Because if they don't understand that like things are going to change, then a sense of permanence sets in, and that's where hopelessness takes seed.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Like I was doing some work on a different project I'm involved with, and I was reading some research from the Trevor Project. And for anybody out there listening, and anybody that knows me, and Soren, you certainly know this. One of my passions is working with LGBTQ plus youth and their families. And so this research I was looking at today from Trevor was around this correlation between life expectancy and life satisfaction. And to no surprise to me or to you or maybe to others, is when a young person sees value in what's going on for them now, and they can envision a future that feels meaningful for them, they see themselves living longer.
Yeah.
Conversely, if I don't see value, if I don't see a future for myself, what's the point of living? What's the point of going on? And I start thinking about a shortened life expectancy.
Yeah. And I think some of that too is perspective. Like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, but that's so exciting because like there are so many different things that I can engage with and take advantage of. But like I have another friend who spends a lot of time talking about how like he doesn't know what's going to happen, and that makes him super like anxious and
crippling
hopeless.
fear.
Crippling fear and like hopelessness, because he struggles a lot with like managing workload with school.
Mm-hmm.
And he likes to game, and he doesn't balance that at all. No balance. And that's something that he is working through right now. But like it is a lot of that too is like perspective. If you see adversity as something to grow, or something unpredictable as an opportunity rather than a potential, negative situation, then that really affects the way things turn out. Because like, I always like to think that life is a series of self-fulfilling prophecies. Mm-hmm. And if you believe that tomorrow is going to be awesome, and if you believe that you can do really awesome things, you're going to do them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that took you some time to get there.
That's true. Yeah.
That took you some time. And, going through the stuff you were going through in your not too distant past, that wasn't the case. That wasn't always the case for you.
Like I said, with the self-fulfilling prophecies, like in freshman year, I would wake up every morning and be like so bummed out to continue existing. And like, I had the mindset where like, if I get behind on homework, it's okay, I'll just kill myself.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was always the out for me. And I attempted on numerous occasions. Mm-hmm. So it was like, whenever anything bad happened, the hope was suicide. Yeah. Like suicide replaces hope.
Yeah.
Which I think is like crazy, but also so easy to understand how that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's both heartbreaking and understandable. And I think, a lot of what you and I have talked about leading up to today has been sort of this human condition, and just how so much more connects us than divides us. And so I think every human on this planet knows what it feels like to feel helpless, to feel hopeless. Not every human on this planet has seen suicide as an option, though. And so there's that piece of something that separates one from another, something that you've evolved beyond now, currently, where that's not even an option. Like if I'm behind on my homework, shit, I got to get my homework done.
Yeah. It's totally escaped my consciousness. Like suicide used to be something that was so like prevalent in my worldview. It was constantly.
Yeah.
Like I used to have dreams about it. Like it would just always be like the excuse, the constant thing. I'd always be like planning.
Yeah.
It was just, it's crazy to me to think, because like I'm thinking constantly right now, and it's about a wide variety of topics now, but like then I was thinking constantly, but it was just about ending my own life.
Yeah.
And that like that pervading everything, either like suicide or like thinking, oh, I'm gonna go like get messed up at some point like later today, or like when I get home, like I did smoke a lot of weed. I'd get home and like, especially too, it's so easy to get as a child. Like you think that I feel like this isn't fear mongering. And I don't want parents to take away fear and feeling like they need to protect their kids, but just awareness. Like me as a freshman in high school could spend maybe 30 minutes asking random people, and I would immediately have somebody in my phone that if I texted them, I could get illicit substances within like an hour, and it'd be dropped off at my house for like a $5 fee.
Yeah. I think a couple things that pop up for me right now, Soren, I think about substances and I think about thoughts of suicide, and they both, to me, there's a similarity there about escape. One is the ultimate escape, the other is a temporary escape, but they both serve a purpose. And I think the other thing I want to say, just for folks listening, is that nothing you are saying is going to be news to your parents. I think that's important to also talk about, that your parents have been by your side through all of this. Your mom's a social worker as well. Your dad is one of the most compassionate, empathic, non-social workers I've ever met. And so this has really been a family journey that you're not disclosing something here sitting with me now that your parents haven't heard yet.
I'm not blindsiding my parents with anything. And like, that's been such an invaluable resource, is my parents are understanding. They listen, they care, and they don't try to control, but they try to meld, right?
Yeah.
They try to guide.
That's a good way to put
rather
it. They
than
meld.
control.
They do meld. Yeah.
And I think that that's such a better parenting model, because I feel like I'm collaborating with them on creating a better me, rather than them having a vision of me having a vision of me, and those two things clashing.
Yeah.
And every parent wants to see their kid succeed. Not every kid wants to see themselves succeed, but like you can find that drive in your child.
Yeah. Not only does every parent want their kid to succeed, I believe that every parent wants their kid to be better than they were, to have more opportunity, more successes, more happiness. They want their next generation to be better. And I think that's part of the fear I see in a lot of families right now, is it is easy to stop and look around and go, this isn't better. This isn't better than I had it.
It's not better, but I would have loved to grow up in the 80s, 90s, but also like I'm quite like outwardly queer.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it would have been more of a shit show than my middle school career was.
I'm here to tell you it was not. Growing up in the 80s and 90s as somebody who identifies as gay, it was not piñatas and unicorns and parades.
Yeah. So like, even though the childhood experience of kids is to some extent being robbed by the internet, also it's important to look at like, there is such welcoming environments for your kids now if they have certain like idiosyncrasies that like would have been frowned upon. And like, I think that the cultural model for high schools has changed so much, because it used to be at least I look at like movies and talk to my parents, it used to be fairly hierarchical where jocks that were at the top, but now like I always call it cultural speciation.
Yeah.
Like there are groups of 20 or 30 kids and there's no hierarchy within it. It's just like welcoming environments and nobody, obviously there is mild bullying, but I think way less than there was.
Yeah.
And like kids know not to be openly assholes because they will get put in their place for that.
Yeah.
Like it's the people who are being mean that, or like taking advantage of others that are like frowned upon, not the kids that are being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Which I think that is a really important cultural shift. So like, even though some things have gotten worse and obviously in a big way, other things have gotten so much better.
Yeah.
So just look, I always look at the silver lining because I tend to like poke holes in arguments. That's like the way my brain works, or poke holes in situations and see the flaws in them. And I have to actively adapt my thought patterns to not do that. Because if you focus purely on the negative without seeing the flip side of it, you're end up going to feel bad out of every situation that you interact with.
It's a no-win scenario.
Yeah, it's zero sum.
Yeah, you know, I feel like some of the stuff we're touching on now, we're going to have these conversations in the future. I want to talk more with you about bullying. I want to talk more with you about the experience of a young queer person, about gender and about sexuality and about queer joy and how, like, at the end of the day, I feel like the kids are all right.
Yeah.
And as adults, which is part of what I think of this so powerful about these conversations today and in the future, the kids are all right. And as adults, I think we have a lot to learn by listening to what you all have to say.
And just to touch on you saying that we were just skimming over these things, I feel like this conversation, we've touched on a lot of things that we could spend hours talking about. Yeah. So this podcast in many ways is just a teaser for some of the conversations that we can have, because we're just like organically going through the interest that we have. And
which was our model.
Yeah, exactly. That was the idea for this podcast.
Yeah. And you know, this whole idea of inspired insights, where we're not going to do the term paper podcast on just one topic. We're going to talk about a whole lot of things. We're going to skim surfaces. What would make me ecstatic is knowing that parents and youth might listen to this and have this conversation in the car ride to school or at the dinner table that night. We want to inspire folks to have these discussions, to try out some of these discussions. You and I are both very big on stigma reduction, especially around mental health and wellness. And by having to be able to just say the word suicide out loud on a podcast is pretty taboo by itself.
Yeah.
We want to be able to break down some of that stigma and give people permission to inspire them to have these conversations in their own world, their own spaces.
Yeah. And like, I see a lot of my friends, their parents either get angry at them or are afraid to talk about topics involving like their mental well-being, because like it's really scary as a parent to have your kid be like, hey, I'm having suicidal thoughts. So then the parent either has like, because they're having an extreme adverse emotional reaction, they either get like angry, and I see that a lot with a lot of my friends' parents, and then just ignore it entirely, or they like break down, and then the kid feels like they can never talk about it again because it's hurting their parents or like hurting them.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the biggest as a clinical social worker, that's one of the biggest stereotypes about self-harm and suicide that I see over and over again, is families will say, but Chris, if I ask them if they're feeling suicidal, I'm going to put the idea in their head and they're going to do it. And it's going to be my fault because I said the S word to them. And you're shaking your head and I'm doing the same. Like,
that's crazy.
We've got to take that stereotype and break down that stigma.
Yeah. And like, obviously a lot of these things are normalized online, and I don't think that that's helpful, but exposure, like your kid's already exposed to these things.
Right.
And if they're in a bad mental space, it is super normalized to think about that. So you getting involved in that conversation can only help, because like kids if they're in a bad mental space, they're going to think about that external from whatever you say, and only you doing outreach and support can help them. Ignoring the topic just makes the kid feel more alone.
Yeah.
And I think like I did like a complete 180, and obviously that opportunity has not been provided to the vast majority of children. Like if I had even like 10% less supportive parents, there's a very solid chance I'd be dead right now.
Yeah.
Like very solid chance I'd be dead right now.
Yeah.
Because I was getting desperate in the end there.
Yeah. And because your parents, you're, and I know, knowing your mom as well as I do, being a social worker in your professional life is way different than being a mom and being a social worker in your own home. And so some of that stuff goes out the window as well. But to your point, by creating the space where it was okay to talk about this, where you weren't going to be met with anger, with defensiveness, with consequence or punishment, you were going to be met with, let's talk about it. Tell me more about what you're going through. I want to understand. Made it safe for you to say those words.
And like I mentioned that I felt like I was digging myself an emotional hole with like shame. Like I'd engage in a bad behavior and then I'd be like, oh my goodness, my parents are so angry with me about this, when really they were just sad.
And scared.
Yeah, and scared. And I was like, I can't even like bring myself to interact with them because of this, because I was suffering with so much like shame and guilt, and I still do to some extent.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were open and willing to have that conversation at all times and always kept like a fairly cool head with me allowed me to break out of that belief that it was an adversarial relationship.
Right.
And it became like collaborative effort. And like I said, conversating with like my mom or dad is such a major tool in my toolkit.
Yeah.
And I think like might be my most effective one.
There's no doubt in my mind that it is.
Yeah.
Knowing you and knowing your family there's no doubt in my
mind. But I just think that that's super important. And like, especially if your kid is suffering with like a hostile, environment in the school system, or like, I know that a lot of kids feel like it's a hostile environment, not maybe because they're actually being bullied, but just because like they're falling behind on the workload, and then they feel guilty to their teachers. And then they can't complete the assignment because it's embarrassing to turn it in late. And then I don't suffer from a lot of anxiety, so I didn't even realize that was a perspective until I had a few in-depth conversations with a few of my friends who are super, super intelligent, but just have awful grades.
Yeah.
Because like there is a really emotional relationship that kids have to their schooling. And like they feel obligated to their teachers to some extent, especially like in the classes that I'm in. Like all the kids are the smartest kids in the school.
Yeah.
And like that's our community.
Yeah.
And when we're not performing well grades wise, or we fall behind on work, it feels like we're letting down our community.
Yeah. That's super powerful. Yeah.
So like, even if your child isn't being bullied necessarily, school could be a really anxiety provoking thing simply because of the workload, the way it's structured, and like they feel obligated to engage with it in a certain way.
Yeah. Well, and in those situations, and I've had these conversations with kids I've worked with and families I've worked with, that in those situations, it's almost like the kid is their own bully. We all have that voice. RuPaul, one of my heroes, talks about that inner saboteur, and that, we all have that voice that says you're not good enough. You're not attractive enough. You're not smart enough. You're never going to be able to do this. And we're our own bullies in those situations. And so these kids, these friends that you're talking about, they may not be bullied outwardly in a super traditional sense of the word, but they're doing some internal bullying, that monologue, that inner narrative that is just constantly driving them down.
Yeah, 100%. And like I mentioned that I think that there's less bullying, but I also think that there's more self-loathing.
Yep.
Right? Like, especially we look at these things like social media. Kids aren't bullied for their weight anymore, but kids are suffering from eating disorders at a higher rate. So it's like where we are bullying ourselves. The weight that is being put on our back is placed there by our own, like, I guess, undesirable self-criticisms, right?
Yep.
And a lot of social media like provides vision to people presenting themselves as better than like your average human being. And like, I hate all the red pill content because it's like teaching young boys to be like some alpha form of themselves.
Yeah.
Everybody is imperfect. Everybody struggles with issues. You can do things to be a lot healthier and perform better in society, but also like you don't need to subscribe to an archetype of a man or woman or person that you feel you should be. Just be the best version of yourself, not a version of someone else.
Yeah, there's something so liberating about not having to sign on the dotted line on this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be for the rest of my life. The other thing I'm thinking of is just the reality that inner critic doesn't ever really go away. You know, the older we get, some of us we've got larger volume dials that we're able to turn it down from time to time. But as I'm facing down the gun at 50 years old, even driving here tonight, that little voice was like, this is going to be stupid. Nobody's going to care about this. This is going to be lame. You're going to sound dumb. Like that critic is always there. We just learn different skills and different approaches to just silence them from time to time.
Yeah. I think that my middle school experience really silenced that for me a lot. Like I don't feel obligated to do anything that I don't want to, which is bad because it is bad in some ways and good in others because it makes me feel like I don't have to do anything. I only do the things that I want.
It's balance.
But but also like I think the thing that led to that is like if I was criticizing the things that I was doing, then it would make me behave in a way that wasn't me. And that was less comfortable than myself criticizing the way that, and like, I think that like in middle school, I would wear a different like color pattern blazer to school every day. Like I was on it. The fashion game was going crazy, but also like that led to some pretty hot, especially when I was on the football team. Like that was not accepted. And if I was anxious about the way that I was presenting myself, then it would have like, you need to be able to pull those things off. And like, even now I've lost a lot of that like outward sparkle and become more academic. I think because I worked to suppress that so heavily. So now like it's on occasion that I bring things out like that rather than it just being me every day. And I feel bad because I've like I think lost a little bit of myself in that, but also I've gained insight and I don't feel obligated to do anything for anybody.
I'm looking forward to talking with you more about the sparkle and the shine. I that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, about how we unfortunately live in a world where we teach kids at a very early age to dull their own shine, to not sparkle too brightly because they might blind somebody else. But again, it's balance. Like that feels like the theme of tonight's conversation of I want to be able to have a kid know they can sparkle and shine as bright as the brightest star in the sky, but also realize the other side to that is the world's not always going to appreciate the shine like I do. And so rather than learn to dull or hide the shine, how do we accessorize the shine? How do we match it with a cape, with a cloak, so that we're not hiding it, but we're working it?
I totally agree. And like, I think that kids sometimes don't know how to regulate the degrees to which they express themselves, which sometimes results in like problematic behavior or just not talking at all. So I totally agree with like accessorize it, imbue it within yourself, without it being an aggressive thing that is compromising others. Make it something that is like you, but also very socially cohesive.
Yeah. Make it your superpower.
Exactly.
So you can leverage it. You're in charge of it. You bring it out when it's time to bring it out, and you can pull it back when it's time to pull it back.
Yeah. I used to have a lot of issues in class because I would just say anything I was thinking, and it'd come right out my mouth. And sometimes the thing that I was thinking would be the exact right answer and like super important commentary on the class. And other times the thing that I was thinking would be like vile nonsense that wasn't even that funny of a joke. So I have had to spend a lot of time like learning to code switch and control what I'm saying and
regulate.
Regulate. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at that at all. Like I still am pretty bad relative to my peers at managing what I open my mouth and say in a classroom environment or in a professional environment.
Yeah. And that's a skill that, as somebody that's almost 3 times your age, that's a skill we're all learning. We're all, there are moments in my life, probably every day, where the stuff I want to yell isn't going to get me anywhere in my career or socially. So we learn to regulate. And I think learning to regulate is different than dulling your shine. Learning to regulate is about learning how to accessorize your shine.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, Soren, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to many more of these conversations. I'm looking forward to getting some feedback from folks, listening to this one back, dulling our own inner critics, and just seeing where this is going to go. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I think that this has been a super interesting conversation. Like, I love talking to you. I think that you have some really awesome insights, and your like philosophy and approach to the world is something that I really enjoy and is similar to mine. And I want to model mine after. And yeah, this is really exciting. I am beaming with excitement.
I see your shine, my friend. Well, until the next time, I'm Chris McLaughlin.
I'm Soren Peterson.
And we'll see you back on Inspired Insights.
Yes, thank you so much for listening.
The Inspired Insights podcast has been brought to you by Inspired Consulting Group, LLC.
Edited and produced by Amanda Seidel.
Music by Derek Herder. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.